Hey guys, and welcome back to the full-time travel planning series. I can't believe it's already the 16th episode. It's flown by, to be honest, but with all this time in quarantine, I've really been able to power through them for you guys. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about 16 travel pitfalls that you should know before traveling. And so guys, in episode 16, we're going to be talking about so many different travel learnings or things you should know or things you'll find out if you don't follow them later on. And basically what I mean by that is these are travel learnings, travel pitfalls. Basically the idea is these are a variety of different things that we tend to assume or think or overthink or forget about, whatever it might be, that will cause us to maybe run into challenges along our way traveling. So by the end of this video, I think you're gonna feel much more confident about a bunch of different things that you might not have thought of, and maybe some that you have thought of, but you haven't thought of it in the way that I'm about to explain it to you. So the first one's gonna come as no surprise to many people. It's overpacking. This is one of the most common travel pitfalls people run into because you always think you need so much more than you actually do. But in reality, most things you're gonna ever need, you can purchase on the road. Maybe besides some certain medications for you, or maybe this exact shirt you love, most other things you can absolutely purchase on the road. And guys, I'm not gonna cover it that much more in detail here, but I have a video that I'll link below, which is actually the bonus episode for this series, which goes way more into detail about the packing learnings we had after 3 months of travel. Number 2 is forgetting to follow a budget. So if you remember that budget you created in episode 2, and for those of you that haven't seen that video, I'll put a link in the description below. In episode 2, we taught you how to create an amazing travel budget. Obviously it's a budget, it's an estimate, you're never gonna get it exactly right, but the idea is you're going to get it close enough where you can keep yourself within a certain range, within a certain percentage, and maybe cut back in some areas and maybe, splurge a little bit in other areas. So if you find yourself completely blowing your budget, you need to rethink, am I blowing it because I just missed a cost, or am I taking it one step further than I originally planned? And that's going to be an important thing because if you're going through your budget much faster, you might severely cut down the amount of time you can travel for. So what I recommend doing is checking up on where you stand on your budget once every month, or maybe even more often than that, depending on how long you're traveling and how much money you're traveling with and how tight your budget is. But I would definitely recommend to keep up with it because that way you can make sure before it's too late that you're not overspending. And number 3 is packing way too much into your itinerary. Now, in an earlier episode, I talked about only spending a few days in a certain location, but even a step further, if you are only spending a few days in one specific location, don't try and pack too much into your itinerary for that day or for that week you're in that location, because you're gonna find yourself exhausted, you're gonna find yourself getting burnt out much quicker, and you're gonna find yourself not really having that freedom that a lot of us really love about traveling, because you're gonna be like, I need to do this, this, and this. So if there is that much you wanna do, then just make the amount of time you're staying in a place much longer, and then you can have a little bit more of a free-flowing type of itinerary when you're spending your time there, and that way it's not packed tight where you're just kind of stressed out following a very specific itinerary. Some of your best travel stories you're going to have are just meeting people randomly while traveling and then just going and doing something unplanned, so you wanna have time for that stuff too. Number 4 is booking too far in advance. Once again, another thing that I wish I would have known before traveling. There's something about booking, at least for me, that I love doing. I love just booking stuff because I just feel that much more excited about it because I'm like, all right, it's literally written in stone, unless there's a pandemic going on, like right now. Then it's not written in stone. But in most normal circumstances, it is quite exciting to go ahead and book far in advance. And I did that when I first started traveling. I booked maybe 3 months of travel in a row. And the first couple months I got by with it. I had my itinerary fully set up. It was good to go. Everything was paid for. I knew where I was going, what I was doing. The part that bothered me at first, which wasn't a huge deal, was that I couldn't stay in places that I was kind of vibing with. I just had to keep moving on to the next spot. I had transportation booked. I had my accommodation booked, blah, 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 blah. It was all already in stone. But then it came to November, still had stuff booked out further in advance, and Chile had protests. You probably remember me mentioning this. I had to cancel my trip there, and so I lost a bunch of money. And that's when I kind of learned booking that far in advance might have saved me a few bucks on the forefront, but then when I had to cancel something that was non-refundable, I was losing hundreds of dollars doing that. And then I was like, you know what? I'm not gonna book that far out in advance. Now, I might not be able to get that ideal Airbnb or that ideal spot that you need to book out far in advance, but I mean, that's okay because I would much rather have that flexibility. And if there is some place that I come across that I really know I wanna go to, then I'll book that far in advance. But otherwise, only book a couple weeks out when possible, guys. All right, guys, and number 5 is back up your content. The second you lose one of these, you are going to be petrified if you lost all of your memories, especially if you only had it stored here. It wasn't in the cloud, it wasn't on a backup device. So back up your device, guys. You're gonna be very, very happy you did. And by the way, this isn't just for content creators. I back up a lot of data because I take a lot of footage, I take a lot of content all the time. But anyone that likes to take any single photos, you should definitely back it up. I would download maybe Google Photos. I would get a subscription to iCloud if you have an iPhone. Some of those options are going to put it in a cloud, and in my opinion, the cloud is the best spot because it's much more unlikely that something's gonna happen. If you have a portable hard drive and you back it up and you have your phone and they both get stolen, you're screwed. The cloud's in the cloud. Now, obviously something could happen somewhere in the cloud where it could be corrupt, but it's less likely than something happening to a physical hard drive. So number 6 is going to be, make sure you're not inconsiderate of other people's cultures. And you're probably like, well, I know that, why would I do that? But you might not even realize actually that you're being inconsiderate in other people's cultures. What do I mean by that? Well, if you don't know much about that culture's norms and what's going on there, you might be doing something that back wherever you're from is normal. And all of a sudden to them, it's very offensive or it's rude. I remember when I was back in Spain and I studied abroad, this was when I was very, very new to traveling. I never thought to look up other people's cultures. It didn't even strike me as a thought because it was the first time I had ever really traveled anywhere. And I was sitting at the table eating with basically one hand with a fork and basically going like this. I would chop all my meat up at once and then I'd have a bunch of little bite-sized pieces, put my other hand down here. And then after maybe a couple weeks of being there, my host mom or host brothers, I can't remember exactly who, were like, Mac, why is your hand under the table? And they basically explained to me that it's like a feeling of, you know, what are you doing down there? Like put both of your hands up here when you're eating. It's kind of like a norm there. So that was something that I didn't even realize what I was doing, but I was making them uncomfortable. Like, why is he doing that? Why is he acting that way? And that's such a minuscule example, but it's one that I can relate back to because it was just such a simple thing that was somewhat of an annoyance for them day to day, and I just literally had no clue. It goes back to the theory I have mentioned in multiple episodes by now. Learn about that country, the culture, and it will make you that much better of a traveler, that much better of a person. Number 7 is trusting everybody you meet. This is so easy to fall into the trap because you really don't ever know, and you don't want to be cold to people, or how are you ever going to meet people, right? But in reality, you need to have boundaries and you need to only trust people to a certain extent. Whether it's a scam, whether someone steals something from you, just have your guard up. You can't trust everyone in the world, and people are going to understand as long as you're not rude about it. If you saw my last video, that's one example where I trusted my brother, cousin, and we trusted this guy who was in the train station who was trying to be so nice and tell us that the train wasn't coming. Meanwhile, he was scamming us to go use his services. That's one example, but there are so many more examples of people that seem like they're trying to help you and they're not. And I'm not saying, you know, put your guard up and don't make friends. Just don't give them more trust than you can risk having broken, because that's when it's going to be substantial. Number 8 is making sure you're flying into the right airport. This has happened to me in cities like London. It's happened to me in cities like Melbourne, Australia. Basically in any city where there's multiple airports, and you can very easily find yourself booking a super cheap flight and you're like, wow, I'm flying to London for $5 from Spain. How is this even possible? Well, there's a good chance you're flying into one of the airports that's much further out on a deep discount airline. So for you flying into that airport, you're probably gonna have to pay for a train ticket into town or a bus ticket into town, and you might run into more baggage fees because you're on that deep discount airline flying into that airport that's much further out. So those are things you just want to double check. Number 9 is double checking your reservation details. Most recently when I was in New Zealand, I booked a hostel and it was actually one night later. So I had to go through a pretty annoying process of reaching out to Hostel World, talking to the hostel to change the bookings and everything. And I think I still had to pay some sort of fee because I booked that night and it was within 24 hours of not canceling it. So, you know, it lost me a few bucks. Had I just checked the dates, it would have saved me, you know, 10, 15 bucks. If it happens a couple times per year, I don't know, it might save you $100. If you're staying at much nicer places, it might save you like $500. So just double check that. In my opinion, it's always good to have a calendar out, have your itinerary planned into there, and then you can make sure that you're actually booking the right date. All right, number 10 is not eating near tourist attractions. We've all done this. We're like, let's go see the Louvre in Paris, or let's go to the Taj Mahal, or whatever the attraction might be. It's very convenient, and it's also very nice to stop at that restaurant with a nice outdoor patio right outside of the tourist attraction. But keep in mind, they're paying more money to be there, and you're paying more money to be there. So inevitably your food costs are gonna be much, much higher. Not always, but in a lot of cases it's going to be very much tourist focused. It's gonna be foods that are a bit closer to what you're used to. Maybe it's still local cuisine, but for the most part it won't be as authentic. So what I recommend to do is walk a few blocks away. You're gonna have cheaper prices, you're probably gonna have better food, and you're gonna have a more localized experience most of the time. So follow those 3 tips and I think your meal's gonna be even better. Number 11 is taking taxis. This is something I never do anymore. Ever since ride sharing has become a huge thing, I always ride share. And by ride share I mean Uber, Cabify, Didi, Ola, all those across the world, whatever's the big one. I've talked about ride sharing in other episodes, but I always bring it up for different points. And the reason being is rideshare has more than just benefits of the cost. Think about it. Your personal information and GPS tracking is attached to every ride. So if something happens, you can easily call an emergency. The driver's information's in there and your location's built into there. So people are gonna be that much more likely to find you. And then also you're going to run into less taxi scams where they don't turn the meter on and they charge you an arm and a leg. That is just when they'll completely screw you over. So ride sharing apps just give you that extra sense of security. Number 12 is not checking the weather before you go somewhere. So there's been way too many times for me to even want to admit that I've gone places just expecting the weather's gonna be great, or it's rainy season, but hey, maybe I'll get some sunny days in there, and it just rains the whole time. Yeah, that's because I didn't look it up and I didn't plan accordingly. There's wet seasons in some of the most beautiful places in the world, guys. They're not always just like what they seem like on Instagram, so make sure you plan accordingly. I went to this place called Calador in Mallorca in October, I think the end of October it was, and it rained every single day out of 7 days except for one afternoon. Yeah, we literally sat in the Airbnb every single day, every single night. It was already at the end of the season too, so it's not like we could go to the bars and hang out because not too many people were there. So if we would have looked it up, we would have been like, hey, well, should we go? Should we not? It's supposed to rain, 6 out of 7 days per week. Look that up, guys. You'll be very happy you did. For me personally, that's one of the most common mistakes, but now I've learned my lesson, I think, enough times where I won't anymore. Number 13 is taking the first price you're offered. So what I mean by taking the first price you're offered, in certain cultures, not all, certain cultures, there's a bargaining tactic that's built into most, if not all, transactions. But I'll tell you that's not how it is at every place. You can't walk into a McDonald's or Burger King in Turkey or India and be like, hey, let me get that McDonald's double cheeseburger for 50 cents. All right, 75 cents, you got a deal. No, you got to know your places. In places like, Mexico or India or a lot of these places, honestly, probably in most places around the world, there is some aspect of bargaining. It just depends on the culture if it's more prominent or not in certain places. So in most places when you have beach vendors, you can haggle them a bit. Now in places like Morocco I've been, or in India, you can haggle prices in pretty much any place you go to besides, Western chains. And remember, you look like a tourist to most people, especially if you're wearing this. They're gonna charge me the most amount they can ever charge on that first offering. So one thing I will mention though is that price might seem super cheap to you still because you're from a Western place that things are way more expensive. There's one of two ways to approach it. Some people are just like, I don't mind paying a little bit more because it's still cheap for me and I'm supporting their economy. Other people like me, I fall a bit in the middle. I don't haggle every single price to the last penny I can get out of it, but I want a good price. I don't want to be screwed over. I still want to get it, maybe not for the locals price, but something not too far away, maybe 10-15% higher. I'm okay with paying. But keep in mind, if you're just paying these really expensive prices, you're really screwing it up for a lot of the other travelers who are traveling on a much tighter budget, because the expectation is that that traveler that doesn't have the money to pay triple the locals price now needs to come up with that money because that salesman wants him to pay that price that he just sold it to you, where you just accepted it for 3 times the price. And number 14 is buying too many souvenirs when you're just starting your trip. Remember, you have a suitcase that you're going to be dragging around for however long it's going to be. Not sure if buying that souvenir that you're going to give to someone in 7 months is worth carrying. Now, it might be small, but think about that. You do that 10 times, you have 10 small things that you're literally bringing around the world. Just maybe plan it for your last place on your itinerary to pick up a bunch of souvenirs, or consider shipping stuff back. Because I'll tell you, when I've bought stuff in places, a few times I've ended up just getting rid of it because I'm like, geez, I do not have the space. I'd rather have these essential items in here. And I ended up just, saying screw it. And then I wasted money. And I never, at the end of the day, that's a personal preference thing. Some people love souvenirs and it's worth it for you. If it is, go for it. But I'm just telling you personally, when I've done that, I've ended up tossing it a few months later. At first I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna carry it, it's gonna be awesome. And then I'm like, whoop, drop it right in the trash somewhere. Number 15. This one's a bit more challenging to explain perfectly, but in general, certain things you should consider buying a higher quality version of it. I'm not saying buy a branded version, but I'm saying buy a higher quality product, especially if it's something you're using on a day-to-day basis. There's been times I've tried to go cheap on flip-flops, for example, or sandals as some people call them, or thongs as Australians call them. If you buy a cheap pair, chances are you're gonna break them in a short amount of time and you're gonna keep rebuying a pair very frequently. That cost is eventually, in most cases, going to be more expensive than just buying a higher quality pair that's going to last you. And for flip-flops, thongs, or sandals, whatever you call them, it's better for your foot if you get ones that are a little bit, more built for your foot. So that's, an added benefit. But in reality, I'm more focused on this topic as a cost thing. Buying something super cheap might seem like the way to do it at first, but if it's a low quality, crappily, if that's even a word, manufactured product, you're going to have to replace it more frequently. I've made that mistake with a handful of things, whether it's been cameras early on that I purchased like, hey, I'm gonna get this because I found it for a really great deal, and it's, some knockoff product that has no reviews, and I'm like, oh, it's so cheap, it's $5 for a camera. Well, that camera lasted me maybe one shoot, and I was like, well, this is garbage, so I ended up throwing it away and ended up buying a higher quality one later when I needed to. Think about where you're gonna travel when you're on a bus ride or a plane ride, these types of things. You're probably gonna be wearing your jogger pants or sweatpants quite frequently. I bought a very cheap pair when I started traveling, and I realized I wore it every single time that I was going on a bus, train, plane, anything that was transportation, because it was really comfortable to kind of sit in for long periods of time. Well, the thing got holes within just a couple months. Pretty low quality, but I got it for like 15 bucks. You wanna know what I did when I got back to the US? I bought a nicer quality one and spent the amount of money I would have spent earlier. I don't recommend that for every single thing you buy. I just recommend things that you're going to rely on, get a higher quality product. And number 16 is there are countries with unique laws, things you might not even realize you're breaking the law on. It's kind of the same thing with cultural norms, except now you could get much more than just a slap on the wrist here. You might be fined or thrown in jail, or who knows, depends on what it is. It could be pretty bad. Anyways, what I mean by this, guys, is make sure you look up what the local laws are, maybe unique local laws to be more specific here, for different locations you're going to. I want to tell you maybe just a couple funny laws. Not all of them you're going to get busted for easily, but I'm giving you some pretty ridiculous examples just so you can have a better understanding of how much laws really can differ in other places. In Singapore, it's illegal to chew gum unless you have proof of it being a therapeutic use. Number 2, flushing a toilet in certain areas of Switzerland after 10 p.m. is noise pollution. That's just crazy to me. Noise pollution. If you had to go to the bathroom, well, don't drink too much water before bed, guys. Number 3, I love this one. Number 3, it's illegal to pee in the ocean in Portugal. There's a lot of fish and sharks they're gonna have to arrest, but we'll see if they catch them. I don't know why that's a law, but I checked it and it's in multiple articles that I found. I don't know the reasoning behind it, guys, but be careful. Number 4 is don't wear your camouflage in Barbados. leave that back at home. Otherwise, you're gonna find yourself in some trouble with the Barbados government. Alright guys, and that pretty much wraps up the 16 travel pitfalls in today's episode. I hope you found some of those funny, insightful, helpful, whatever they might be. I wanted to make this video because there are so many learnings that I wanted to put together and share them with you, because not all of them have been some sort of showstopper, but some of them have cost me some money. They've been a bit annoying, or they've just not put me in the right position early enough to where I wanted to be, not understanding the culture, not understanding the laws. And for any of you that have done some traveling and have some other travel pitfalls, I would love to hear them, so put a comment below so that way myself and anyone else watching this video can check out what those are as well. And so that wraps up this episode. In the next episode, episode 17, this one's going to be a bit different in terms of we're going to be talking about what are things you want to value while traveling. And how I would explain this episode is making sure that you're not only getting the perfect Instagram photo, but you're also living what that perfect Instagram photo feels and looks like to other people. So we're going to take a much deeper dive into that. I'm going to share with you what my examples are, things that I really like to do while I'm traveling, things that are important for me to remember on a day-to-day basis, so that way I can have the best possible travel experience. I can look back at my travel and really feel like I maximized the time I was there. And so if you don't want to miss that video and you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button right below, turn on that bell notification as well, and that'll make sure you get alerts whenever we post new videos. Additionally guys, if you like this video, leave it a thumbs up, and that'll make sure other people like you are able to find this video as well. Alright, thanks so much, and we'll see you in the next video.